Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. And I'd like to welcome all of you back to uh, our class, our course on the sociology of development. I have covered quite, um, I think, up to LU8 the last time that we met, and I'd like to continue with LU9, which is on participation and development. Now, for this lecture, or rather for this recording, we'll just concentrate on the important points um, regarding the issue of participation and development. The notes are there already, uploaded on ELIP for you to read besides this recording with some comments and so on. Okay, first of all, uh, this is what we're going to do. We will look at the concept of participation, and specifically we'll go into the issue of participation and development, of course, and we will look briefly at the concept of participatory development approach, and why or what are the benefits of it, and one of which is empowerment of the local people, and we will look at that as well. And then we'll look at the concept of ethno development and also the rights to development. So that will be the thing that we will discuss in this lecture. So what is meant by participation? Now basically, you will find a lot of definitions if you care to, you know, Google the terms and so on. Yeah. But anyway, participation is, according to Oxford Dictionary, is defined as to have share in or to take part in. I think, in other words, if you participate in something, you are taking part in that something. For example, if you're participating in a protest or demonstration, for example, as you can see what happened in the United States over the last few days, um, where the citizens protest against the death or of a black man, and you could see across the United States that people are participating in demonstration and protest um, against the treatment by the police, which caused or which led to the death of George Floyd. Anyway, let's go back to our lecture. So participation is a concept that is being used in a wide variety of fields, and has obtained an evenly large range of meanings. Yeah, you could see from the pictures or from the images here the different forms of participation. For example, we look at um, participation at the local villages, by the farmers, uh, by participation by children, and so on and so forth. Another slide also showing participation. It could be political, it could be religious, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and one of the biggest form of participation worldwide is perhaps the voting or the ballot box. Yeah, where people participate in political process. Yeah, to decide who is going to be the leader, what issues to be, uh, you know, um, tackled, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and the FAOs has its own definition as well. For example, participation is referred to as process of equitable and active involvement. So that's a very important concept or keywords: active involvement. Yeah, of all stakeholders. In other words, the local people, the other stakeholders, and so on. Yeah, in the formulation of development policies. In other words, when you want to formulate, develop a policy for development and so on, they need to engage certain group of people. Yeah, um, and then analysis of the problem and so on, the planning and also the implementation of the project, as well as monitoring and evaluation of development activities. Okay, so it is an organized effort, yeah, in within an institutions and organization, yeah. All right. Now, in terms of development, um, participation is referred to as process through which all members of a community or an organization are involved in and have influence on decisions related to the development activities. In other words, it's the opposite of a top-down approach, and this is where um, local people, local communities, all members are involved, yeah, participate in the development process. So it implies that development projects will address the community or the group needs on which members have chosen to focus. So in other words, the idea, the problems and so on comes from the people, and they are to be consulted. So that all phases of development process will be characterized by active involvement of community or organization members. So what are the core features of participation? Number one, it is voluntary involvement. Number two, that people who participate influence and also share control over development initiatives or decisions. And it is also a process of involvement of people in different stages of the program. So some may be involved in the early stages, some of them may be involved more actively towards the end of the program, yeah, stage of the program. The ultimate aim is to improve the well-being of people who are participating in the program. So one of the approaches to development is known as participatory development. Okay, so what do we mean by participatory development? There are a lot of definitions. If you Google or rather read books and so on, but we can sum up some of this general definition. For example, participatory development can be seen as a bottom-up. In other words, from the people themselves, from the local community, and also as people-centered approach. In other words, it's centered around the problems of the people, yeah, who in which the program is aimed at developing the full potentials of people at the grassroots level. Yeah, particularly when we talk about the poor, the marginal social groups, and so on. Yeah, the belief is that the value of participatory approaches in action and research. Yeah, in other words, the importance of the participation and participatory and also empowerment approaches. Now, one of the reasons, or rather the benefits of participatory development is also to empower people. Yeah, so participatory and empowerment approaches are similar in their focus on the interdependence between individuals and contexts. In other words, the approaches differ in that empowerment aims to bring about social changes. That's the one that the focus of empowerment, which will benefit the oppressed, the disadvantaged group, the poor in the society. So they cannot do that without being involved in active participation. So it is a necessity, right, that they must be involved actively in the whole process, yeah, whereby they are committed, they fully commit themselves, develop the skills and make decisions and so on. Yeah, and then on the issue of empowerment, empowerment here can be conceptualized as a long-term social process whereby people move from being from a dependent, used to be dependent on government and so on and so forth, being powerless by passive position, in other words, on the receiving end and so on, towards a position of control, towards being competent, and also the position of power for them to determine their own life. Okay. So with regard to rural development, for example, participation includes people's involvement in the decision-making process, in implementing programs, their sharing in the benefits of development programs, and their involvement in efforts to evaluate such programs. So evaluation actually is the last phase in any development program. In other words, to evaluate the success, the worth atau penilai, of the programs that has been implemented. And then we can talk about community participation, whereby not just individual but the whole community active participation in the process. All right, to influence the direction and execution of development projects. And community participation, there's you can see the pictures on the right side, showing the various kinds of community participation in the respective project. So community participation refers to a process by which people are enabled, become actively and genuinely involved in defining the issues of concern to them, in making decisions about factors that affect their lives, including formulating and implementing policies, in the planning, developing, and delivery of services. That's according to the World Health Organizations in 2002 report. You can also look at the level of participation. Not everybody perhaps are involved 100% throughout the project. So some may be involved in the beginning, some may be involved passively and not actively, and so on and so forth. So the level of participation we can categorize as follows. One is a passive participation, whereby the beneficiaries or the community, for example, basically welcome the project proposal and support them, but nothing more than that. Second level, which is high, a little bit higher, is the increasing involvement. This is where they began to develop more trust in the project and more contact with its activities and the staff who are involved in the project. So they may also begin to take on some responsibilities as well, masuk jatuh kuasa dan sebagainya. And the third one is this is the higher level of participation, is called active participation, where they play the role of active partners in the project's implementations and development and assume increasing responsibilities. The fourth and highest one is the ownership, or also termed as empowerment, where the beneficiaries or the people or the local people are both willing and also able to sustain and further develop the initiative begun by the project. In other words, at this stage, they don't depend on the implementing agencies. Once the project is done, they will continue to do so in the future without any further assistance. In other words, they independently will continue with similar project in the future. That's what is empowerment is all about. Giving them the power instead of just following what people told them to do. The participatory development approach emerged in 1970, so something quite new. So it's a process which involves citizens actively in all decisions that influence their lives, and that's our definition. Um, so it involved dialogue among the various actors, during which agenda is set. In other words, in the meeting and so on, they will decide what to do, what kind of project, and so on and so forth. And then local views, indigenous knowledge are sought after. In other words, people ask what they think about the project, what ought to be done, and their decisions or their voice are well respected. Okay, so this implies that negotiation rather than dominance, yeah, which no, dominance used to be what was practiced in the past for a top-down kind of approach, but in the participatory development approach, um, the idea is to have some kind of negotiation um, between all actors, yeah, the local people, the implementers, the planners, and so on, yeah. Okay, so this is some of the notes on participative development, and I think you can read some of this. I will not go into details, all right? Um, but basically, if we talk about participative development, it is the opposite of the top-down approach. Yeah, it is an alternative to the top-down development approach. In the past, it has always been assumed that the implementers, the planners, knows everything. Unfortunately, many of projects throughout the world, especially when they involve for local communities, farmers, and so on, some of this project failed because those projects did not meet the needs of the local communities. Now, what the planning was done from the top without consultation with the local people. The okay, sorry, that's the stakeholders. The second one, the institutional perspective of participatory development is this is where define participation as the rich and inclusion of inputs by relevant groups, yeah, in the design and implementation development project. Um, so institutional perspective uses the inputs and opinions of relevant groups or stakeholders in community as a tool to achieve pre-established goal defined by someone external to the community. So there is a difference here. In this one, somebody or someone outside of the community have a goal to achieve, and in order to achieve that goal, he needs the inputs and opinion of the stakeholders in the community, right? So that's the difference. You can say, for example, the forestry department, the agriculture department may have their own um, established goal. So what they need is to get some inputs and also opinions from the relevant groups in the community, which is going to be affected by the program. Right. So this approach advocates of PD emphasize the difference between participation as an end itself and participatory development as a process of empowerment. So in the end, and it is an end in itself. So participant may be asked to give opinions without assurance that this opinion will have an effect or may be in form of decision after they have been made. Yeah? So in the process of empowerment, the proponents have said that the participatory development or PD tries to foster and enhance people's capability to have a role in their society's development. Now, these are some of the examples, yeah, that we have with regard to participatory development. For example, the UNESCO's funding project, which employs ICT for development initiatives. And what they do is they have the local content creation and distribute to formation local information networks. So this is a bottom-up approach where it involves extensive discussions with the community, yeah, and decision making with target community. So the community group members create content for the project according to their capacities and also interest. So in other words, their interest is very important. Their level of capacities is also important here. So this process facilitates engagement with information and communication technology, or ICT, with the goal of strengthening individual and social development. So this is so this participatory content creation is an important tool for poverty reduction strategies. Yeah, so in other words, the involvement of local people here is to determine the content itself. What's the content? What's the knowledge that need to be included in the ICT for development initiatives? Okay. So from the institutional perspective, there are 4 key stages of development project. Number 1, they have to do some research. Number 2, then they have to design the project. Yeah. Number 3, once they have done the design and the planning, then they have to do the implementation. In other words, they have to implement the project that they have planned. And the 4th one, and this is sometimes forgotten or given less emphasis, the evaluation. It may sound small, but without evaluation, how do you know that the project is successful? Yeah, so it needs to be done. Yeah, you need to find out whether the delivery process is successful or good or bad and so on, and also the eventual ataupun the outcome is actually, or the objective actually achieved. Yeah, so if we don't evaluate, you will never know about that. Okay, that's just to show you cartoon here. The importance of participation and all that. Yeah. Okay, these are some of the reasons why participatory development is important. Number 1, because of failure of past development programs, yeah, in the past to improve the quality of life of people, and perceived failure of economic growth models to bring benefits to the majority. Past models of economic development, unfortunately, fail to have an impact on the majority of the people, or the poor people. And emerging vision of the world where rights of people are assured, okay, the civil, the political, social, and rights to action citizenship, engage in participatory and deliberative democracy. Now, you can see from here between the previous development approach versus the participatory development. Previously, this is in the past, where the approaches is based on expert knowledge, yeah, the scientists and so on, yeah, and then it is a top-down approach. In other words, knowledge comes from the top. It is assumed that the receivers or the local community do not know anything. Yeah, so recipients of development are treated as passive or conservative, while as the participatory development approach, this is where the local knowledge is sought after. In other words, the knowledge of the local people is very important. And then the bottom-up, this is also sometimes referred to as the bottom-up approach. The reason being the fact that discussions, consultations, and so on, fact findings regarding the condition of the local communities and so on. Yeah, so that information will be used to plan for the relevant program. So the people rather are treated as the center, active and seeing situation from their point of view. So in other words, the focus is on the local community. Okay, so that's the difference between the previous approach and the participatory development approach. Remember, the PD, or the participatory development approach, was something which is quite new. It only began to be popular in the 1970s. Yeah, way before that, it has always been more or less a top-down rather than bottom-up. Okay, these are some of the advantages of people's participation, and I will not go through this in details, other than just to say that the advantages of having people to participate. One is to increase efficiency, right? Effective utilization of the available resources. It can increase effectiveness of the programs, and also it helps self-reliance. Yeah, with active involvement of the people, it is possible not only to break the mentality of dependence, but also to increase the awareness, self-confidence, and the power and the control of the development process. Okay, and also in terms of coverage, people's participation can be an important way of ensuring the flow of benefits to the target group. Okay, so the coverage can be wider, covering a larger part of the society, and it is also it can help with the issue of sustainability, because if a project is not sustainable, then once the project is done, that's it. Yeah, so we don't want that to stop there. We want the ideas, the practice to go on beyond the project. What I call we don't want it to stop at the end of the project. We want to continue in the future. In other words, we want the ideas to be sustainable. We want people to be independent and so on. Okay, but there are some negative views regarding participatory development. Number one, because of you are involving the people, it may slow down, yeah, the project a bit, yeah. Participation costs time, yeah, and money, because when people participate in a project, they are taking their time off from other activities that they are doing. So it may cost them money, because they're not doing other things which may be generating income for them. So it's that opportunity is lost there. There's no guaranteed impact on the end product. Yeah, there is no guarantee that the impact will be there. And losing time for talking, in other words, that you will probably spend quite some time just to talk, to discuss with people, yeah, and before you come up with the idea. So that is considered as losing time. And also destabilization of social organization. What do we mean by that? Well, because of the processes, it may destabilize the existing social structure, right? So, but it's something that may happen, but we don't. But somehow it may not be happening. Yeah, but it is a possibility that it may disturb the social organization, or destabilize the social organization. Also, there is a possibility also that the burden could be shifted to the poor. In other words, lepas tangan, from the officers, from the implementers, just leave it to the poor to implement. That is another danger which we don't want to happen. So these are some of the negative things, but I think overall the positives are outweighing the negatives. So it is still considered a very good approach to development. Some of the important outcome participative development, just to briefly go through that. One is that um, the presence of local people in decision making, yeah, in project design and implementation. That's a very important one. And the people will come through the process with some newly acquired skills and also a sense of being in control. So the process of participation actually helps them to acquire certain skills in decision making, skills in planning, and so on and so forth. Um, Involve collectively organized continuous efforts by the people themselves, and setting goals and pulling resources together, which they may not used to before, yeah, and taking actions which aim at improving their living conditions. Okay, according to Johnson and Clark, participation has a large cost for the poor, and they will invest their participation because they look at it as something that they have to invest in terms of their time, in terms of money, and so on. So when they believe it will secure them valuable benefits, not otherwise available at comparative cost, time, and risk. So um, it's important, yeah. People look at participation as a very important uh, things that they, if they commit themselves, yeah, to the project and so on, they will take it seriously, okay, for their own benefits. Um, some of the key principles, I just go through this, you can read that for yourself. All right, I will skip this one. Okay, and then I think I've mentioned earlier on the various levels of participation. Um, this is in a different perspective, yeah? Looking at the intensity, yeah, of participation. The first level is information sharing. This is very minimal level of participation. Um, Consists of little more than keeping people informed, just to give them ideas, just to inform them that something, yeah, is um, is being shared. In other words, it's a one-way flow without any consultation. Yeah. The next level of consultation, which means that there is a two-way flow of information, yeah, between the implementers, the planners, and the community. Okay. The third one is decision making. This is higher than consultation because this is where people are involved in decision making. In other words, the ideas are taken into consideration and they can make decisions together with the planners, with the implementers, and so on. And the fourth one is initiating action. This is more like the what we call earlier on the empowerment. Yeah, this is the highest level of participation is achieved when people take on themselves to initiate new actions. Yeah? This is the ultimate aim of uh, participatory development approach. Okay, a lot of this approach are now being practiced, implemented in many rural development projects in the developing countries. Okay, it's ongoing, and some are successful, some maybe not so successful, but it depends on the circumstances, depends on the level of participation, and also other issues as well. Okay, so all right, this is also something that I've mentioned earlier on. with regard to rural development. Um, the objectives of people participation in one is to have a better planning and implementation of rural development programs. Number two, it helps to mobilize additional resources required for rural development program. And number three is to empower people, yeah, to play an effective role in rural development. Okay, now a big issue here is with regard to ethnic group, indigenous people participation and development. Why is it important? Is it their right to be involved, to participate? How do you engage them? And what are the problems as far as trying to engage people or trying to um encourage people to participate in the problem? You can see all these pictures. The one in your left is, I think, is something to do with um, an agriculture project which involve planting of rubber, yeah, rubber trees, and the one on the top right corner is participation in small businesses, or rather uh, indigenous people involved with business, selling the agriculture products and so on. And then on the bottom right, um, it has to do with also with some local community um, with regard to their rights, yeah. And the one at the center there, I think, has to do with um, palm oil or oil palm um, project or plantations and so on. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of protest or demonstration with regard to the planting of oil palm in their land and so on. Okay, so the issue is it is important. Yeah, ethnic group participation in development is important. Is it their right? Maybe. How do you engage them? There are so many ways of engaging people, and one that we have mentioned earlier on is to seek their knowledge, to get to gather information, and then to encourage them to participate in dialogue and so on. Right? But having said that, there are problems. This is not going to be easy. There are problems along the way, and um, we have to solve those problems. Yeah, we try as much as possible. Yeah, to encourage people to participate. The idea is the project is meant for them, something which is good for them that will change their life, improve the livelihood and so on. If they know that it's going to improve the livelihood, I think most people will accept. Yeah, but uh, like in most projects, uh, smooth selling is almost uh, difficult to achieve. Yeah, along the way you will come across problem, but that's what we are there for anyway. As implementers, as planners, we have to deal with that problem. Okay, the next topic is on issue of rights to development. We talk about whether indigenous people and so on have the right to development or not. Yeah, so the People's Right to Development, the Declaration of the Right to Development in 1996, says that the right to development is an inalienable human right by virtue of which every human person and all peoples are entitled to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy economic, social, cultural, and political development in which all human rights and fundamental freedoms can be fully realized. Okay, so this declaration is very important. Um, it means that uh, indigenous people, local people have the right to development. That's what it is. Yeah. Now, so it is a human right. Development itself is a human right. Okay. So if you want to read more on this, on the Declaration on Right to Development, you can look at this website on United Nations Human Rights um, website, and it stated there that on the issue what is right development, who are the rights holders, right? And also the right to development, regional human rights system instruments, and the rights to development agenda, 2030 agenda, SDGs, and so on. Yeah. Okay. So the next few slides, some of the uh, development as far as right to development itself. Yeah. So the current development in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world, based on the United Nation Declaration. Yeah. 1936. Okay. So it is a human right, and the resource and the source of human rights based approach development. It is both individual and collective, and it has both national as well as international dimensions, and it entitles everyone to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy development in its economic, social, and cultural, political, and so on. Yeah. Some of the principles and elements you can see here. Number one, it is people-centered development. Number two, it is a human right-based approach. And number three, it is an issue with participation, yeah, active, free, meaningful participation, and not through force, yeah, of all individuals and people. So it's not forced participation, but rather voluntary and meaningful participation. Another principle is non-discrimination. You cannot discriminate based on race, based on gender, or based on language, or based on religion. Yeah, and the next one is next principle is on equity. In other words, fair distribution of benefits of development, not just on one or two individuals, but rather a fair distribution of those benefits. Yeah, and another principle is the right of people to self-determination. In other words, uh, including full sovereignty over all their natural wealth and resources. So the rights of the people on their natural resources in the place where they live. For example, the forest, the land, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this slide also showing you some of the elements and also the principles, yeah, which I have more or less mentioned earlier on. Yeah, okay. So who are the right holders and duty bearers to the right of development? So the right holders are the human being, individual or group. So all individuals, all peoples, entire populations. Or it could be emphasis on women, children, and other groups, or marginalized groups, the poor, and so on. Yeah. Who are duty bearers? Duty bearers are, it can be agencies, it can be international communities, it can be all human beings. Yeah? So the state or the nation have the primary responsibility to respect, protect, and fulfill the roundtable discussion at three levels: internally, internationally, and collectively. Another duty bearers are the international community, and of course the next one is everybody, all human beings, and all those whose actions or omissions have an impact on human rights. Yeah, So all of this, in other words, everybody are considered as duty bearers. Um, so actually, the roundtable discussion in global and regional human rights instruments and systems, it exists in every regions of the world. It started with the United Nations Declaration to the Right Development, and then there is at regional level they have the Inter-American Human Rights System, which involve the United States, Canada, and South American countries. And then you have the African rights system, human rights system also, which is declared in the African countries. And then for the Asian region or Southeast Asian regions, we have the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. And in the Middle East, we have the OIC, Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission, or the Abu Dhabi Declaration. So we have this declaration. Yeah. The only thing is whether or not um, people are following or implementing according to the declaration. So there is an agreement already that has been set. So it is in place, right? Question is whether people will follow, whether people will stick to that uh, declaration that has been stated earlier. Okay. Now, this example, the Charter of the Organization of American States, yeah, and then you have the American Convention of Human Rights in 1969, way back in 1969, and then the African Charter of Human Rights in Human and People's Rights, sorry, in 1981 for the African nations. Yeah, and then we have the case law, African Commission on Human Rights, yeah, Human and People's Rights, which you can see from the list here, quite a number. And then the Arab Charter, which I mentioned earlier on, yeah, on human rights. Okay, it's quite similar, yeah. The basic charter or the human rights declaration is stated in every one of these. And this is for the Asian. Yeah. So the details, if you want to know, you can refer to the specifics one. You can click on that, you Google and find out the details of it. Yeah. And then also I think this is something that you should know on the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goal or SDG, right? For example, to eradicate poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, people have access to quality education, equality in terms of gender, access to clean water, sanitation, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So all of these are Sustainable Development Goals or SDG. Okay. So okay, this is another one. Yeah, with regard to the roundtable discussion and 2030 agenda. Addis Ababa Action Agenda. Sorry, Paris Agreement. Okay. So what's the relationship between RTD and SDGs? Yeah, there is a mutual reinforcement and synergy in action between the two. The roundtable discussion is important, but the sustainable development goals are quite similar. So yes, there are something that this is the goal by 2030. Yeah, by 2030, according to the 2030 agenda, the aim is to leave no one behind and commit to reaching the farthest behind first. In other words, the very poorest people, that's the first target, right? Reach to the farthest, ensuring the SDGs and targets are met for all nations and all peoples and for all segments of societies. Okay, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs, and with their respective targets, is to seek to realize the human rights for all and to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Okay, so the new agenda is grounded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is informed by other institutions such as Declaration of Right to Development, and the new agenda also recognizes the need to build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. Okay. Um, so this is, if you can see the relationship between the three, the RTD, the SDGs, and also the 2030 agenda. Okay, so they are actually all aligned together. We talk about the RTD, a roundtable discussion principles element, the people-centered development, human rights-based approach, and so on. And then that is inclusive, yeah, included in the 2030 agenda. Um, um, each of the paragraphs and so on and so forth. And then now we have the SDGs and the targets, all of those. Yeah, for example, under the first three roundtable discussion principles and elements, those are included in SDGs 1 to 16, while as the other the principle of participation, equality, non-discrimination, and so on, those are included in the SDGs 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. So that again, just to show you again the sustainable development goals. You should be familiar with this. Right. This is the one that the world is trying to achieve. Right. Okay. The same one. Okay. So okay, this is again you can read on this the round table discussion at SDGs. I think I mentioned about that earlier on. Um, so round table discussion and SDGs for everyone, everywhere. Right? So Agenda 2030 and SDGs reflect and integrate human rights principles and requirements and are a plan for action for people, all people on the planet Earth, and for their prosperity. So that's all, ladies and gentlemen. If you do have any question, I would urge you to do so. I want you to, what I'll do is I will either you give me feedback on Ellipse, or what you can do also is to make use of our WhatsApp group. We use WhatsApp to communicate. If you do have any question to us, feedback and so on, please do so. That's our means of communication during this time where we are not able to see face to face and so on. So thank you very much. Bye bye.